All right, of course, here at In the Circle on D1 Softball, and of course, we are excited. We're proud because we cover every conference in college softball, all 31 conferences. Of course, anybody can break down and preview the Power Four, but what about the other 27 conferences? Well, it's what's become a tradition here on In the Circle and D1 Softball. My next guest and I have done this now a handful of years where we preview every conference in America, ladies and gentlemen. That is, of course, our very own D1 Softball's Justin McLeod. How many years have we been doing this now?
Oh gosh, it's gotta be close to five at this point. Five, six.
5 years. And it's become one of the more popular segments and episodes, however you want to describe it, ever. Like, people are fascinated because we are the only people really that go in depth on every conference. And what we'll do is we'll mention every conference and sort of what to look for here in 2025. We'll spend obviously a few minutes, a lot more on others than some, but every conference will get mentioned on this episode. And what's interesting about this, Justin, I think it's an interesting year in the mid majors because it is one less power conference now with the Pac 12, at least for now, is gone as we know it. And I think it kind of leaves some interesting questions. For example, there's some potential extra at large spots that could be had in the NCAA tournament. But I think the biggest question I think many are going to be wondering this year, who is perhaps the fifth best conference, assuming it's not a Power Four conference that maybe drops to number five. One assumption would be that one of these top mid-major conferences will end up as a top five league. That is guaranteed at the end of the year. My question to you, Justin, who is that right now? Who are the candidates for that, and who do you think it could be?
I think the easy and maybe even the obvious answer is the American. That was a conference that got two bids, two teams, including an at-large bid into the NCAA tournament last season. A Wichita State team that honestly was close as a third. And the American looks different this year. Obviously, we know what happened at Charlotte in the offseason, but you've got a Wichita State team, you've got a FAU team, you've got North Texas sitting there, and you've got a Carolina team that I think could climb some. I like the top half of the American, and I think the American continues their scheduling piece. If you think about it, Charlotte, pretty much for the last 5, 6 years now, they play a really tough non-conference schedule. Like that was the hallmark of those Charlotte teams that ultimately built into a couple of NCAA tournament appearances. North Texas, geographically, they're in a position. They're going to play Oklahoma State and Oklahoma or Texas or A&M or whoever, all those big schools that are nearby. Um, I think they're even playing Texas Tech at one point. Um, Florida Atlantic down in the Sunshine State, but there's a lot of teams that start down there. So there's a lot of big matchups for FAU, East Carolina, even UTSA, for instance, a team that, not necessarily geographically, excuse me, not necessarily record wise great so far, but geographically around a lot. So they're going to play a lot of big, high RPI teams. I think the American to me is pretty much the clear cut favorite as that top five league. And I think they're going to prove it. I think they've got the makings to be that in the preseason. I think they've got the shot to prove it during the season.
Last year, for whatever it's worth, the Sun Belt was the highest rated non-power conference in the country, had three bids into the NCAA tournament, two at larges. It's a younger league this year. But I guess, Justin, the interesting question I have for you, you got the Mountain West, which is going to break up in a couple of years here with this whole Pac-12 Mountain West, which maybe we'll touch on when we talk about the Mountain West. Maybe we won't. Certainly the ASUN's gone through a lot of changes. CSA's kind of, are we looking at here for maybe the next few years a rivalry developing between the Sun Belt and the American, where maybe that is a constant back and forth on who is the best non-power conference? Because that's kind of been the trend with those two conferences. They've seemed to have alternated over the last few years as far as which has been the best non-power conference.
I think it's possible. I think it's possible we could see them alternating, but I also think it's kind of an interesting spot because both conferences have a little bit of a rebuilding year to an extent, just based on what happened this past offseason. So obviously with the Sun Belt, you graduated a lot of talent, a lot of top pitchers who kind of made the name for the conference, made it a three bid league last year, a four bid league. I think it was 2021. So you lose that. Obviously, the American has a lot of graduations, a bunch of coaching changes, two different looking leagues. I think it's possible you could go back and forth. Although I think it's possible the American has a chance of putting a little bit of a firmer stamp on things for the next couple of years while the Sun Belt is rebuilding a little bit, while they're developing new aces, things like that. I think the Americans got a shot at, you know what, maybe they become that top five league, give it 2 or 3 years in that position, and all of a sudden the shoe's on the other foot. Now it's the Sun Belt who's got to rise and take over. So I do think it's possible you could see some alternating who's the best. I also think it's possible that the American could really take hold and run with it for a few years and make the Sun Belt play catch up for the first time in a while, maybe ever.
All right, let's get into it. Let's start with the Americans, since you brought it up. The conference championships will be in Tampa. Florida Atlantic's the defending regular season champion. Charlotte is the tournament champion. You mentioned Charlotte, a massive turnover with Ashley Chastain now coaching at South Carolina. She brought a lot of her Charlotte players with her there. Courtney Brialt is the new head coach at Charlotte. Kind of a rebuild there. FAU lost some offensive personnel. They lost Trinity Schlotterback, who graduated, but they returned, have a good pitching staff on paper. Wichita State lost, of course, Addison Barnard, but does return Lauren Lucas there. Give me your thoughts on the American, who are the contenders, and is this a multi-bid league again this year?
I do think it's a multi-bid league, yes. I think the American definitely lost a little bit of their strength from last year just because you don't have as many juggernauts now. Going into last year, Charlotte was the strong one. Even changing conferences coming into the American, Charlotte was the strong one. Wichita, kind of always there. Then you have the up-and-comer in FAU. This year, it's obviously a little different because you don't have the strength of Charlotte. You do have a North Texas team that's still around. So that kind of finishes out your upper tier this year with Wichita, FAU, and North Texas. The thing for me about the American, I do think they're a multi-bid league. I don't think it's a given on who those teams will be. I think there's some competition to be had. I also think this is a conference that, there's a lot of teams with question marks, but I think some of those teams have the capability of really punting those question marks out of the park. Like I think you look at a Wichita and you have to replace Addison Barnard. That's hard to do. You've got some youth, you've got some inexperience in terms of the postseason, but then you also have Lauren Lucas and Cameron Compton coming back from injury. You've got Alex Aguilar now a junior. You got Chloe Barber, she's a sophomore, but so all of a sudden Wichita, they've got youth, but then you got, Wichita though has big hitters still here, got home run hitters, got some pitchers who could be worth something. Then you go to an FAU who graduated, I think it was 8 seniors after last year. That actually could have been more than that. And so you think, it's a very different looking team. They're not, they're going to be weak or whatever. Well, the thing is, I like this FAU team. I really do. I like what they did in the portal this year. Autumn Courtney, to me, was one of the best arms in the portal. And instead of going to a big time Power 5, she decides to go to the beach in Boca. I think that's a huge move. And then throw in like a Kylie Shelton, who, by the way, was an all-region kid. Like that, when I compiled the transfer portal stats from last year, she was an all-region kid at Colgate. She was an award winner at Colgate. That's kind of sneaking under the radar, but the talent's there. So that's an FAU team that, they lost everybody. How good are they going to be? They could punt that really easily. And then you get North Texas, who they know how to win. It's been a little bit of a struggle to get to and then to go back to that NCAA tournament berth. But the time they made the tournament, they made the regional final in Stillwater. And you've still got talent there. You've got a little bit of a retooled offense, but you've still got Skylar Savage in the circle. We know how good she is. So, I really like the upper tier of the American this year. I'll throw in East Carolina, who I think has a chance to climb. And then you got South Florida, by the way, who Peyton Dixon somehow manages to win games that don't make a lot of sense. She's just a wizard. She's just sturdy and steady and durable. So I actually really like the American this year. I do think they're a multi-bid league, and I think they've got a shot at having some good teams again. I don't think it's going to be a multi-bid league out of pity. I think there's going to be a couple of teams in the tournament, and I think they're going to earn it.
East Carolina I like a lot, kind of like FAU. Last year, remember, I picked FAU here as my sleeper team to make the tournament. I said they would make the tournament, and I was happy they made the tournament. Even though that was the one team I missed in my bracketology. But in fairness, I thought the committee wouldn't put them in, so I was happy to be wrong on that. I think they're, and one thing I like about them this year, now they've gone through that, and I understand they have some offensive questions, but I like their pitching staff from a depth standpoint. Ainsley Lambert's a great reliever. You mentioned, obviously, what they've added there to go along with what they have coming back. And the conference, weird, it sounds weird, but the conference tournament is going to be in Tampa. I actually think that favors them because they're going to be able to bust there where everybody else has to fly in other than USF. I think that'll favor them versus last year. If you remember last year, they had that emotional series sweep last year of Tulsa to win the regular season title at home. Then they had to fly all the way to Wichita, which was a tough ask there. I like them a lot. Wichita historically does not play well in Tampa. I'm with you on North Texas. Roddy DeLong's been there before with Skylar Savage. They've added Meredith Gorsuch as the pitching coach. They're going to be in the mix. East Carolina, I like that roster a lot. I think they could be the sleeper team. They're like, whoa, East Carolina, where they come from. I agree with you. I think it's a multi-bid league. I don't know. I don't think it could get to a 3 to 4 bid league, which has been in the past, just because I still think the bottom of the league might just kind of hold them down. We kind of saw that last year where there were times during the year last year we were projecting 3 to 3 bids maybe for the American, maybe 4. But the problem is if the bottom, like Memphis, which is in a massive rebuild, it seems like for a while now, you got first-year Trina Prater head coach there, Van Studerman, her second year at UTSA. You got Charlotte, as I mentioned, Courtney Briall, their first year. Even UAB, first year with Taylor Smart. We don't know how that'll go first year. Mm-hmm. If some of those bottom teams struggle and our PIs aren't good, that's going to kind of bring everybody down, unfortunately, for the league. But I do think it's a bottom. I think it is a multi-bid league. One last thing here, a couple of things, actually. I just mentioned some of the new faces in the league. Which coach of all those stands out to you that could make an impact? Kind of like Jordan Clark has done at FAU. Rodney's done that when he arrived in North Texas. I know that was his USA days, but who could be one of those new faces that could make an impact here in the next couple of years?
I mean, I'm going to ask for the goal line to be extended there, but I think Trina Prater's got a shot at it. The one thing I'll say for Prater is, she's been a part of some programs that struggled, and when she took over, she did well. At Campbell, she took over a program that was doing well, and she did just as well. So, I mean, now at Memphis, you said it's a massive rebuild. I mean, the old adage is Rome wasn't built in a day. Right now, they're going to be happy to get one wall of the city up in 3 years. Like, it's that massive of a rebuild. But, like I say, Trina Prater's done that. Maybe not to the extent, but she's built programs up. So, as long as Memphis is willing to back her to do what she does, I could see Prater putting Memphis in a position. I'll say this, putting Memphis in a position where they're not that low 200 RPI winning, single digit games a year, like steadily progressing upward to a point of, I'll say, contention. I think it'll take longer than a couple of years. I know that was the goalpost you gave me. I want to extend the goal line, like I say. I'm mixing my metaphors there, but I do think Trina Prater's got a shot at Memphis doing something that at least gets the Tigers back into a program of respectability. Like right now, the last half decade, they're not close to that. They've got a lot of things that need to be done, but I think she's got a chance to do them and actually improve that program.
Give us a couple of players people should watch for in the American.
Well, I mentioned Autumn pitching staff. Anybody on FAU's pitching staff fits that bill. You've got Gabby Sacker, who was the conference US years ago. Courtney, obviously. You got Ainsley Lambert, who you mentioned in a relief role, was a first team all conference. Pitching to me is the best in the conference. The pitching at FAU to me, honestly, is one of the better staffs in the country. And so anybody on that staff, I would put on that list. I'm going to say Lauren Lucas at Wichita as well. Returns from injury, pretty powerful hitter. I think she's going to be a pretty linchpin piece of their lineup. And then I'll go Emma Jackson at East Carolina. Big hitter after transferring in, didn't really play at her last school steps in, and she was wowing last year. I think those are some of the names that you're going to hear a lot. if things go like they should in the conference. Maybe things change and maybe somebody comes out of nowhere. But I think those are some of the names you're going to hear a lot in the American.
All right, so you could, by the way, folks, Justin wrote pretty much every conference forecast in the mid-majors, correct? You were all 27. There's mini previews, full previews, in depth. Each league is different. All his predictions are in there, correct?
Yeah.
That is right there. That's what you get if you're a subscriber to D1 Softball. So I'm not going to ask him to make predictions. I will make predictions here because I was not part of the forecast. So we'll see how it goes. I got FAU winning the tournament. I got Wichita winning the regular season. I got them both in. I think North Texas has a shot to get in as an at-large. Some things have to break right for them, but I definitely think they will be in the mix in the American on that one.
Well, and I will say, I agree with you that I don't think we're looking at 3-bid American by any stretch in the preseason. We'll add, though, I think there is a chance. It might be a sliver of a chance, but I do see a recipe at least. Maybe it's on page 147 of the cookbook, but I'm mixing metaphors again, but I do see a recipe for how the American could get 3 teams into the tournament. And I think there will be 3 teams that at least have a case. Like, I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's going to happen, but I see a recipe.
I think if you're the American, if you could get a third team in or a third team right there in the first 4 out, maybe a fourth team in the mix there, I think that's pretty good. I think that would be pretty good. That's
Christmas Day. That's Christmas morning.
Correct, for the American. Now, of course, the league that was there was 2 conferences last year in the mid-majors. There was multi-bid leagues. The American was a 2-bid league last year. The Sun Belt was a 3-bid league last season with Louisiana, Texas State, and South Alabama. But boy, we've had a lot of departures in the Sun Belt. Highlighted, of course, Louisiana losing Jerry Glasgow, who's now at Texas Tech with some other pitcher over there in Lubbock we've heard about. He's taken some of his players, 5 of them, with him to Lubbock. Sam Landry decided, I'm not going to go to there. I'm not going to follow them there. I'm just going to go to Norman, Oklahoma instead to pitch there. Texas State begins life without Jessica Mullins. South Alabama begins life with Olivia Lackey. Let me ask you this question. Of those 3 teams I just mentioned and those 3 aces, Sam Landry and Chloe Resacero, if you want to throw her in there for Louisiana, Jessica Mullins, Texas State, Olivia Lackey at South Alabama, which of those 3 programs will miss that respective pitcher the most?
I mean, it's easy to say the Raging Cajuns just because they lost both. They lost Riasetto and they lost Landry both, and they're going to have some struggles in the pitching department. It's easy to say that. Outside of that, I think all 3 of them are going to miss them, just for the record. But I think Mullins is going to be hard to replace for Texas State, which is funny because Madison Azua is a sophomore at Texas State and is actually the best statistical returning pitcher, best ERA returning in the conference. But I think the thing Texas State's going to miss about Mullins is Mullins could step in against, we saw it, Texas, Alabama, whoever it was, on whatever turf it was, she was going to give you a game. She was going to compete. It was not going to be a blowout when Mullins was pitching, no matter the opponent. And no matter how good the opponent's offense was. I think Texas State's going to really miss that piece. I think that's the one thing for me that Texas State is going to really hate to see go now with Mullins graduated, because Azua is good. I think she can be an ace for them. I don't know that it'll happen as a sophomore this year. I do think she'll be an ace, but I really think Texas State's going to miss the sheer dominance that Mullins had of the circle. South Alabama will miss Lackey. Lackey got most of those SEC wins last year, not all of them, but she got most of those SEC wins that catapulted South out of the tournament. She was really good. She was sturdy, innings eater. ULL missed both of their co-aces, if you will. But I really think Texas State will miss that dominance of Mullins. I really do.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why it's going to be a challenge for the Sun Belt to duplicate being a 3-bid league. I think they have a shot to be a multi-bid league, but it's going to be a challenge for them. Louisiana, whether Allison Habits in her first year there as head coach, whether anybody wants to admit it, or up there in Lafayette, it's kind of a rebuild there, basically, this year. South Alabama, a bit of a rebuild there. Texas State, probably the favorites going in, but that could open up the door for somebody else in the Sun Belt. Give me a sleeper or 2 in the Sun Belt here that could kind of crash the party.
Well, I definitely like James Madison. I do like James Madison. They've got a good core of returning hitters. I really like the combo of Peyton List, Kirsten Fleet from the circle, obviously List, the 2-way player. Um, I like the core that James Madison has. I really do. Um, I think the thing about James Madison, and Lauren Laporte said this to me when we did our preseason call. Um, and I'm paraphrasing, but this senior class this year for JMU came in right after that World Series run. And so they've never played without the pressure of living up to the World Series run. Not that that's necessarily that they're constantly feeling, but it's always been there because that's what they followed. But this group, I think, and they made that Sun Belt transition with that pressure still there, which is kind of a key piece of it too. But I think the group of talent, I think the core of talent at JMU this year, it could catapult them to a good place. I did pick them to finish high in the conference. I picked them to be the best team in the East Division of the Sun Belt. I think they've got a shot. And the thing too is that James Madison knows how to win. Like that program knows how to win. They know how to support a winner. That coaching staff. So it's not going to be new territory for everybody. New territory for a lot of the players on the field. Certainly, if they're contending for a conference championship in the Sun Belt, maybe a postseason run, but not new territory for everybody. I think that's a key piece too. Really like James Madison, and then throw a Louisiana Monroe in there. Why don't you? I like they got a couple of pitchers who are worth something. The twins, Megan and Morgan Brown, two really solid hitters. Twins. I think they're a good tandem at the plate. So throw maybe a ULM in there to make a nice little run.
Yeah, I think this could be the year that the party crashes there in the Sun Belt. I like James Madison. That's my pick to win the Sun Belt. That is my
Ooh,
surprise pick. I am doubling down on JMU for reasons that you just mentioned. I think Peyton List, in fact, is my pick for Player of the Year in the Sun Belt. Just giving bonus predictions there. I know you still
there you
like
go.
Texas State to
I do.
repeat there, which I think is good pick. I think the max potential for the Sun Belt is a two-bid league. I don't. I think that's best case scenario. It's just too much transition there. Look, the Cajuns. I know it's weird to say, but again, it's a rebuild there for Allison Habits and company. I mean, we both have talked to her. I think it's exciting to have her there, but that's a rebuild. They're young,
It is.
especially in the circle there. So I think that's a tough ask. South Alabama, similar situation there. To say the least. Other notables in the Sun Belt: Whitney Jones, the new head coach at Appalachian State. Becca Mueller, the new head coach at Georgia State. Give me a best player that nobody knows about in the Sun Belt.
How about Brooklyn Ulrich at Marshall? Kid's really good. Kid's really good. Middle infielder, heck of a hitter. Probably doesn't get a lot of attention because Marshall's still kind of in that rebuild, retool, whatever word you want to use, build up, whatever it is. But that kid's really good. Really fun to watch.
Morgan Zirkle in her second year at alma mater as head coach there at Marshall. To say the least. Who do you think ends up being the best pitcher in the Sun Belt in 2025?
Well, that's a wide open race, to be honest with you.
Maybe it's
Um,
most wide open in a long time.
I would agree with that because I think the thing last year and the years preceding is you had that group of aces, whether it was Lackey and Mullins, whether it was Lackey Mullins and Landry, Lackey Mullins and Riasetto, somebody else throw in for something like that. Um,
I mean, we can even go
I,
back to when Leah Johnson was at Troy. Like it's
oh yeah, Leon Johnson. Mm-hmm.
Leah Johnson, right? Where you
Well,
had her, you had her, you had. I mean, this has been an era in the
but
Sun Belt dominated by those handful of pitchers.
yeah, you had that upper tier of aces, and the competition. You really couldn't say the competition was wide open to be the best pitcher because it was exclusive to one of those. Like Lackey was pitcher of the year one year, Mullins one year. I don't know if Landry got one or not award wise, but in any given year, it might be somebody different, but it was gonna be from that group. This year, you come in, like I say, Madison Azua, who was a freshman last year, has the best return ERA. And the kicker is you've seen pitchers at ULM, at Georgia Southern, underclassmen still with room to go, decide either to be done playing or to change schools at the last second. And so they're out of the Sun Belt too. So it's not even just a loss of the graduated aces. You've lost some really good arms in other places. And I think the race for who's the best pitcher is wide open. I think you could see somebody that nobody knows about. I think you could see a freshman at one place or another who steps in and all of a sudden is just shocks the world. Like we talk about how big of a rebuild it is at UL. You got Mallory Wheeler down there who's a freshman. She might get ace type innings and she might do her best with them and it might be great. You think of Tyler Clary transferring from Nevada, and what she has a chance to do down there. Maybe she gets ace type innings in the Sun Belt, and maybe she wows. And coming into the year, I mean, nobody really knows Tyra Clary in the Sun Belt. Like, she's out west, she was in the Mountain West. Nobody really is familiar with her. So, like, I think it's a wide open race for best pitcher. I mean, Azura's best. You've got the lists and the fleets at JMU, even like a Jana Lee at Southern Miss. But I think it's wide open.
I'm intrigued. That's, to me, the big storyline I have in the Sun Belt. Who takes over there? You mentioned Wheeler of Louisiana. If we're wrong about the Cajuns, if they surpass expectations from that standpoint, and once again being near the crown in the Sun Belt, it would have to be at the arm of Wheeler, perhaps winning Sun Belt Pitcher of the Year, maybe Freshman of the Year in the Sun Belt. And boy, that'd be huge for Coach Habits and company if they could pull that off, to say the least. So we'll see. The Sun Belt. We still think it's a top 6 league, even with the part, the kind of the transition there, or do you think another conference could jump them?
I mean, I think another conference could. I don't think another conference will. I think the thing about the Sun Belt, similar to what I said with the American, a lot of those teams are still going to play tough schedules. I mean, look at opening weekend. Texas goes to Lafayette and plays the Cajuns for a game. So, like, Texas State being where they are, like, these teams are going to play top tier opponents. That's going to help, and somebody's going to snatch a win somewhere. Somebody's going to snatch a win here or a win there that's going to help the conference as a whole. I think it's still a top 6 league. I don't think I think there's room to be had by other conferences below it, but I don't see anybody knocking the Sun Belt off its perch.
Of course, one of the conferences that is trying to knock on the door to be a multi-bid league like it once was 6 years ago is the Mountain West Conference. And yet, Justin, I feel like the storylines with the Mountain West has all been off the diamond. With just a wacky realignment in progress going on in the Mountain West, with certain members of the Mountain West going to the Pac-12 in a couple of years to reform the Pac-12. Give me your thoughts on this from a softball standpoint. I know there's a lot of football nonsense going on with all this, which is always the case in this stuff, but just strictly softball, your thoughts on the Mountain West future.
I mean, the softball offering the Mountain West is going to take a hit. It's going to take a pretty heavy hit. You're talking about adding a UC Davis, a Hawaii, a UTEP, but you're losing San Diego State. You're losing Boise State. Two of the at this point probably the 2 top teams, and softball wise, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. I think when that time comes, and we're still a couple of years away, I get that. When that time comes, we're going to see the Mountain West softball offering hurt for it. The conference RPI is going to suffer. You're going to see. I don't even know what the postseason is going to look like for that conference at that point. But the realignment's going to hurt. The good news for the Mountain West is they got a couple of years to enjoy, a good top tier of teams, some postseason experience, playing some good schedules before that happens. But when that time comes, it's going to sting.
So in the meantime, you've got San Diego State as the champion, the team to beat. They've kind of quietly dominated this league here the last couple of years. They've been the team to beat. Who's the biggest threat to dethroning San Diego State?
I think it's Boise. Like, the thing about Boise, the regular season champions 2 years ago. Then last year, I believe they finished tied for 5th in the conference and barely snuck into the tournament that they were hosting, and ran all the way to the conference tournament championship game. Like, I think Boise's pretty fortified. Now, they lost some talent in the offseason, and their pitching is a big question mark just in who they have and what they can do. But they've got Sophia Knight, really good as a freshman. They've got Mackenzie Hanna, Sydney Groves, a couple of big power hitters. I think Boise's the biggest threat. Now, they need to figure out their pitching, and they've had historically good pitching. So it can come from somewhere. I think it's just got to be proven on the field. Like, I can't sit here and tell you I know that this person's going to be good for them in the circle, but I think Boise's the biggest threat. I think it's still San Diego State's conference to lose. I do, and they've lost some pieces, but I like the pieces they have back. I think it's still San Diego State's conference to lose, and I think Boise's their biggest threat to take the title back.
Compare where are the Aztecs compared to a couple years ago where they won that region on LA? They got to the Supers. What's your thoughts on the 2025 edition of Stacey Newman Denise's Aztecs team, which a busy year ahead for Coach Newman Denise? She'll be involved with Athletes Unlimited later afterwards. But for now, worried about San Diego State there. What's your thoughts on them this year?
I mean, definitely a step back from that super regional team. Not the same level of dominance. I mean, you got to think even before that super regional team in 22, that was in 23. In 22, before that, we saw San Diego State actually make a regional final run. So it's like and beat LSU along the way. It was the Tempe regional at the time. So a couple of really good years. I don't think San Diego State's that dominant this year. I don't think they have that overwhelming talent level. I do think they have the potential to have that level of an ace, a CC Siller or a DD Hernandez to match Ali Light. But I think they take a step back, but I still think it's their conference to lose. Good returning talent, championship experience. I think it's still San Diego State's conference to lose. I just think the race maybe runs a little tighter.
Who is the best? Give me the best player or pitcher to watch out for in the Mountain West.
Ooh, that's tough. I like Haley Painter at Nevada. Probably not going to get a lot of attention just because Wolfpack's kind of up and down. But I really like Haley Painter at Nevada. Looked really good with her bat. Had a couple of really good weekends that I think should have caught some extra attention, even more than it did last year. Kind of set her up this year, but I think Haley Painter is really good. I'd keep an eye on her.
Of course, she's playing for Victoria Haywood in her first year as head coach at Nevada. That's the big coaching news transaction of the Mountain West, at least for 2025, to watch out for. I'm intrigued. The thing I'm the most fascinated about the Mountain West is the teams in the state of Nevada, with Victoria Haywood in her first year in Nevada. And then you got UNLV, which, don't forget, UNLV was a win away from winning the regular season title last year. It came down to a winner-take-all UNLV San Diego State in Vegas on that last Sunday before the conference tournament. San Diego State won that game. UNLV won the regular season. Really a good year for Christy Fox and UNLV turnaround last year in the regular season there. Give me your thoughts on those two teams. Victoria Haywood in her first year in Nevada, Christy Fox there at UNLV. I've been on the cusp in the past of making the tournament. Perhaps two teams to watch. Nevada had a good year last year with the interim coach, and I know they don't have everybody back, but nonetheless, I'm fascinated by to see those two teams. I think near the top half of the league.
Two really interesting teams, two kind of enigmatic teams. If you look at UNLV over the last 3 years, you had a really high up year, pretty low down year, another really high up year, peaks and valleys. I don't know what you attribute that to. I don't think it's the talent level. I don't know if it's just good years and bad years. You never know what happens outside the lines, which can always have an effect. But I think UNLV, the thing is, I think UNLV is consistently a good club. But when you have a valley year like they did, and I think it was three, obviously that's going to have an effect. It's like, okay, well, why? What happened? Nevada, obviously, you talk about the coaching change, you talk about the talent that's back and it's not back. Really enigmatic there too, because I think you're talking about, even with some of the talent back, I think you're talking about a totally different Nevada team. I really do. And I don't know which direction that's going to go. I like the Hayward hire. She definitely knows her softball. But I'm really curious to see what that looks like for Nevada. A lot of new faces, some returning faces, and just really curious to see how that plays itself out. Could be a success, could be a rebuild. I mean, that's a Nevada team that they had nice RPI and a nice win total last year. I think they passed the 40 win plateau. So, to me, though, two really interesting, two really enigmatic teams, and two that I'm really curious to see, especially in the non-conference play. I want to see what they can do. Even before conference starts, I want to see what they can both do.
It's going to be interesting. Of course, the Mountain West Championship tournament will be in San Diego. San Diego State will be the favorites until proven otherwise. They're the team to beat there for Coach Newman, Denise, and company. Conference USA. Liberty, in their first year, won the championship last year, regular season tournament. They are ranked in the preseason top 25, including the D1 softball poll. My question to you, is Liberty the best mid-major team going into 2025?
They've certainly got a case for it. I don't know that I call them the best.
They were literally one inning away from the Super Regionals a year ago.
Yep.
They bring back a core of that group, including their pitching, which was so young last year, grew up for Dot Richardson and company. I know she feels good. We had her on the show, among all the coaches we've talked to, but they are certainly one of the teams people have ranked mid-majors. We'll get to the other one later, but you believe they could be, but not necessarily.
Yeah, one of probably top three. I don't know that I want to give them the crown completely. To your point, a lot of returning talent. returning pitching talent, which helps. And you've got some talent like a Savannah Woodard, who was hurt last year, the old transfer from Alabama, who now is back. So I like what the lineup looks like. And they were close to that super regional berth. Just gave it up to Georgia on Sunday. But remember, they came through the winners bracket. Georgia had to beat them twice on Sunday. I do like Liberty. I do think Conference USA is theirs to lose. So we'll start there with conference wise. And I do like the makeup of the roster. I don't know that I'm ready to call them the best mid-major. After thanks to the postseason experience and after what they showed last year, though, I might call them the mid-major that's got the best chance to make a super. I don't necessarily think that makes them the best mid-major, but I do think they're probably the mid-major with the best chance to make a super, just because they've been so close. They know what it feels like, what it tastes like that. And if they can keep the pitching depth healthy, where you're not really just relying on one pitcher at the end, that's going to make a big difference for them. Like, to me, that was their Achilles heel in that regional. That was their Achilles heel down the stretch. If they can keep the pitching depth healthy, I think we can. I'm not predicting Liberty to make the super, but I could conceivably see us talking about Liberty making a super. I like their roster. I think they're pretty well set. Conference is the conference, but I think it's theirs to lose. And then I could see them going on another postseason run. I mean, you're in the last year, Rachel Root, stud that she is in the outfield and at the plate. Got some pieces around her that I like. I think complement her well, give her a chance to really excel and succeed. I do like Liberty. I think they're one of the best mid majors, and like I said, I think they're probably the mid major with the best chance to make a super if one's going to.
They've been close. Regional final Athens we just described. A couple of years ago, regional final in Los Angeles, losing to San Diego State because they knocked out UCLA in that regional. Think back to a few years back, I believe 2021 in Knoxville, where they knocked out Tennessee, lost to James Madison in the regional final. They've been right there, even in South Carolina a number of years ago when they lost to South Carolina in a regional final. Is this the year for Dot Richardson to get over the hump and win that regional for Liberty? Is certainly, I would argue, just from an on-field standpoint, maybe it's one of the bigger mid-major storylines of 2025. Would you not say? Is can Liberty, biggest questions and storylines, can Liberty break through and get to that elusive super regional?
Certainly fits. That's the thing. If you look at what Liberty's done, you mentioned those different postseason exits, kind of some soul-crushing exits in there, if we're going to be honest. But if you think about it, maybe it's the next year, maybe it takes a couple of years. Liberty tends to learn from those defeats. They tend to take that on the chin and run with it. You talk about the regional final appearances, but if you go from a regional final of eliminating Tennessee and Knoxville, well, now you're at UCLA the next year and you're eliminating UCLA. That's hard to do. That's harder to duplicate. That's harder to do the second time, but they were fortified and knew what they needed to do. Then you go into the regional last year, you're so close to making a super because you came through the winners bracket. Those little improvements eventually are going to get to the point where they do make a super. Like, at some point, they're going to build to that point. Is this the year? It could be. But I definitely like the way Liberty does, like, genuinely improve from those crushing defeats. Like, they may crush their souls, but you're right, they're right back at it, and generally they do improve the next year. And I don't think that's a small thing. I don't think that's a small thing at all.
Who can challenge Liberty in Conference USA, A, and B, who's the best player in Conference USA that doesn't play for Liberty?
So challenge-wise, I have to look at a couple of recent champions. I look at a Western Kentucky, very young, very small roster this year. I'm really curious to see what comes out of Bowling Green. I look at a Louisiana Tech. The thing to me about Louisiana Tech is, I need to see some pitching depth there. Their pitching's kind of been their hallmark the last couple of years. I need to see some depth there. Allie Floyd's really good. I think she can stand up to the pressure. What do they do for a number two? What do they do for a Saturday starter, a game two starter? They can solve that. If the bats can kind of be consistent, stay alive most of the year, I think Louisiana Tech's in a really good spot. Personally, though, I think New Mexico State is the biggest threat to Liberty. We've seen the New Mexico State offenses over the years. We've seen them hit all the home runs. This year, I think, though, I do have an offense. Don't get me wrong. I think they do have some offensive talent there. But this year, I really like the potential of the pitching staff at NMSU. You have Desiree Spearman, two-way player, stud freshman last year. You bring in Faith Aragon, who was at UTEP, so knows the conference well, knows the opponents. Granted, the opponents know her, but she knows her way around it. I think she's solid. And then you bring in a Taryn Bennett, who was solid on a subpar Hampton team last year. When there's a pitcher who's decent on a team that's not so great, and then they step into a place in New Mexico State, don't get me wrong, New Mexico State's offense is great, but the New Mexico air, the ball flies, so other offenses are going to be able to come in and do something there as well. But I really like the combination and the mix of that pitching staff out in Las Cruces. To me, the combination of that pitching staff and the offense that we know NMSU can put out, to me, New Mexico State's Liberty's biggest threat.
All right, you mentioned Liberty's one of the three teams you consider best mid-major teams. You're not sure if they're the best, but they're in the mix among three teams. Give me, who are the other teams you have on your list there as far as best mid-major teams?
I mean, it's cheating, but to me, it's FAU and Wichita. I mean, it's going back to the American, which we spent a lot of time on already. But to me, those are the other two right there. I would throw a Boston probably in at number 4. They lost a lot, so they kind of take a step back from that category. Grand Canyon, who I've put in that category in the past, also lost a lot. Still some talent on both of those teams, but to me, I need to see some new talent step up, so to speak. So to me, top 3 in some order, I'm going Wichita, FAU, Liberty. I think those are the top 3 outside the Power 4.
All right, since you brought up Boston, let's talk Boston. Let's go to the Patriot League. You mentioned what they lost. What they did bring back is Casey Ricard. Is she the best mid-major pitcher in the country?
I think so. I think it's her and Maddie Groff. And the thing about Groff, she's a sophomore. So you don't know what you're going to get when somebody comes off of a great freshman year. Everybody knows you now. So it's not just they have film on you. They know you. They're waiting. They're circling it. New school, new program for Groff. She was Southern Illinois last year, Omaha this year. Goes home, hometown kid, so to speak. But to me, I think it's Ricard. Really steady, really sturdy, dependable no matter the opponent. A lot of strikeouts. To me, Ricard's the tops in that category.
Yeah, I agree 100%. If she needs to, if she's not on a list among the best, 50, 100 players in the country, then that list has no credibility. So just go ahead and delete that if you find a list that doesn't include her on that. She's into the D1 softball, among the All-Americans there. Boston's been the heavyweight champs of the Patriot League except for 1 year. Lehigh took it from them 1 year. Is Lehigh still the biggest threat in the Patriot League? Give me your thoughts on who could compete with Boston. Is Boston vulnerable because of their departures? You still make them a heavy favorite?
A little vulnerable, but still the heavy favorite. I mean, do I think they're going to win 50 games again? No. Do I think they can win 45, 46? Sure. Like, I don't think we're talking about a huge drop off. Biggest thing for me with Boston is they did graduate so much. You think about Boston over the last few years. You think of Kayla Ronson or Allison Boaz or Lauren Kelleher. They're all gone now. They're all graduated. That's going to have an impact. No matter who you pick up in their stead, no matter how carbon copy the freshmen or the sophomores or whoever takes their place are, that's going to make an impact. It's going to leave a mark. So that to me is why Boston takes a very slight step backwards. And like I say, slight step backwards, maybe they win 3 or 4 fewer games, like not a huge step. But I think Lehigh still is their biggest challenger. There's some talent around. I think of an Ashton White, preseason player of the year from Army. So there's some talent in different places. But to me, you cannot underestimate having been there before. And no matter how many players on Lehigh's roster were a part of that tournament championship a couple of years ago, Lehigh's been there before. They know what it takes to make the NCAA tournament. They even went out, if you remember, they went out as the 4 seed to the Seattle Regional and actually won a game a couple of years ago when they made that tournament run. So to me, the value of having been there before is paramount. So I do think still that Lehigh is the biggest threat to Boston. But to me, Patriot League's Boston's to lose. Even with the talent they lost, when you've got an arm like Ricard and you've got the returning players that they do, it's Boston's to lose.
Yeah, it's a question of finding that timely hitting there. But Ashley Waters knows what she's doing. She has been very successful. In fact, Boston, I believe, has been among the top 10 most winningest programs in college softball in this decade. So Waters is a big part of that deal. You mentioned Madia Groff. That was the big transaction when it comes to mid-major schools. Madia Groff, of course, led Southern Illinois to the Missouri Valley Championship, led him to a regional final in Baton Rouge. But then her and her sister, her catcher, decided to go back home to Omaha in that region. to play at Omaha. That's really the biggest transaction from a mid-major impact from mid-major. In other words, not a player that went from mid-major to a power conference school, just mid-major to mid-major. That's one of the biggest ones. Your reaction on that move and the impact for Omaha in the Summitt League?
It's huge for Omaha. How are you going to replace Cameron Meyer? Oh, let's just pick up a freshman All-American. Like, I mean, how many Power Fives get to say that, first of all, or Power Fours now? Like, you don't often get to say, let's take what has been a generational player for our program, stalwart innings eater, beat Mizzou in the regional, kid like Meyer. She graduates. Normally, even in a lot of Power Fours, okay, who's going to replace her? Well, now, and we're seeing that this year with a ton of Power Fours. Well, what Omaha got to do, though, was they got to say, oh, well, who's going to replace her? Oh, let's bring in this All-American. That's not common. So it's huge for Omaha. Like, Mike Hurd gets to do things that some Power Four coaches wish they could do. They dream of. It's big for Omaha, too, because Omaha got that postseason experience that I was just waxing poetic about in the Patriot League. That postseason experience cannot be understated. And Omaha had that run in the Columbia Regional last year. A couple of innings, couple of outs away from making a super, going through the winner's bracket, having to let the host having to beat you twice on Sunday. Omaha may not miss a beat. They honestly may not miss a beat. They made 2 tournaments in a row, went to Baton Rouge one year, went to Columbia. Again, kind of like I was talking about with Liberty, improved from one performance in the postseason to the next. Hard to do. That move's huge for Omaha, and it's huge for the Summitt League because all of a sudden the Summitt League still has a juggernaut. Like with Tori Kanishi and Cameron Meyer graduating, had Groff not come in, the Summitt League's in a spot of, oh, what are we going to do? Who's going to be the pitcher or the star to hang our hat on? All of a sudden, Omaha has the answer. It's Groff. It's huge for Omaha. It's huge for the Summitt League. It's a big deal. Big deal.
Can Groff get him back to a regional final like Cameron Meyer did last year? I'm not going to say within a win of a Super. That's unfair. I mean, things got to break right. But can they get to a regional final?
I think they can. I think it's always going to be hard because you're always going to run up against. Well, nowadays you're always going to run up against an SEC team. Let's just be honest. That's just going to happen. But that didn't stop Meyer last year. I mean, Groff's still a sophomore. I did that as a senior. That does matter. That does make a difference. Can they get there? They absolutely can get there. It's got to be one of those things where if they make the NCAA tournament, wherever they go as a 4 seed, the host team is not going to have a gimme of a first round game like that. They're going to be the team that for a host team really kind of just groans when they see their name pop up next to them on the bracket. Like they could make a regional final, yes.
Seeding will make an impact. They were a 3 seed a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. They were a 4, but I felt like they were a 3 seed that got squished into a 4 because they could bust to Missouri, which I'm sure Larissa really appreciated that very much. On that, who's a threat to Omaha in the Summitt League?
I'm going to say South Dakota State. I mean, again, they're the ones who have been there. They're the ones who have been closest. Got a regular season title under them last year after some math percentages figured out. A lot of new faces at SDSU. A lot of new faces. I think the total was 16 freshmen. Let's fill out 2 teams of freshmen. Yeah. But they also graduated. I think they graduated 10 players. So a huge graduating class. Pretty impactful graduating class, too. I'm going to say South Dakota State, but at the same time, I could see another team rising. St. Thomas has done well since they moved up from D3. Could play a factor in the standings at least. Kansas City has gotten better. And I mean, I'm going to say it. North Dakota State finished last in the conference last year. We're not used to seeing that from NDSU. I think it was 4 conference wins. But I could see NDSU improving. And the thing is, you improve by 4 wins, and all of a sudden you go from last in the conference because you got a shot at 3rd place. And you got a shot at 3rd place, you got a shot at winning the tournament. So I think there's plenty of contenders. I'm going to say South Dakota State in that spot. But I think there's a handful of teams that can contend. But I think Omaha leads the pack.
Yeah, I think there's a distance there. Groff makes the difference there for Omaha going there. That impacts Southern Illinois, the defending Missouri Valley champions. Gensu, what is the impact for Gensu and Southern Illinois, and the impact in the Missouri Valley?
It's big there too. I mean, Southern Illinois was able to kind of protect by bringing in Mac Newcomb, former Sanford pitcher, former SoCon pitcher of the year. Bring in Mac Newcomb, give you an ace in the circle. Like, that's important. Give you an ace in the circle. Even if it's, I mean, Newcomb's not an All-American. She's never been an All-American, but she's solid. And she's sturdy, which Groff was sturdy. Innings, strikeouts, all that kind of thing. So that's key for Southern Illinois because you need that ace to bank on. You have to have that ace to bank on. Outside of that, though, I think it helps the Missouri Valley be more competitive. You know, last year Groff was largely a shutdown pitcher, and now you take that out. Newcomb can shut teams down. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think you have the effect of, oh, Maddie Groff, what a year. I think Mac Newcomb's going to go in. She'll shut some teams down, but I think teams will go in more motivated. They haven't seen her. She's not just this freshman stud halfway through the year that nobody's prepped for. So I think it makes the conference a little more competitive. Still, SIU's to lose in my mind. I mean, they're the defending champions and they're solid. But it does have an impact. It does have an effect. They're able to replace her. That helps. But I think it makes the conference more competitive.
How many teams you give a legitimate shot to win that league?
I think there's a handful. I mean, you look at like a Belmont and how they've peaked, not peaked, but risen since they've been there. I don't think they've peaked yet, is where I was going with that. And you think about a Maya Johnson over there, she's a stud. She's a stud in the circle. I think that's important for Belmont. They've got that, like I was talking about with Southern, they've got that ace to bank on. I look at a Northern Iowa, little bit of a rebuild there. They need an ace. Maybe somebody's going to step out. Maybe it takes a minute. I think there are some teams that can contend. I like Belmont. If you're asking me who's the closest next, I think it's probably Belmont in my mind. But I think there's a handful of teams that have a shot at contending. I think the top couple of tiers in that conference are solid. And I look at a Bradley team too. I really like Bradley as a sleeper in the NBC. I really like Bradley. Sidney Kennedy's a two-way stud. They looked really good, improved a lot last year. Bradley's got a shot at being a sleeper team there.
Yeah, I like Belmont. I like Bradley. I'm with you there. Laura Matthews done a good job there since coming over to Belmont. Can the league ever get back to being a multi-bid league? Like, there was a stretch there where it was a multi-bid league there from about 2019 to about 2021. I mean, they'd sneak in a second or third team. Or is the league now so big that it's just not going to be able to produce an at-large team there?
I think they certainly think they can. I don't see it. And the kicker is twofold. I don't think the conference is where it was when they were a multi-bid league to that extent. But I also don't. I mean, and I don't think it's its size either. Their bottom tier is not great. But to me, you don't have the strength of schedule. You don't have a ton of teams in the Valley playing really super tough schedules. There might be a tough opponent here. There might be a high.
Well, and that's why I feel the size of the league. I feel like the size of the league hurts them from that reason, because now you've picked up some teams that maybe don't play a tough schedule that hurts you on the resume standpoint within the league.
Well, I mean, yes, but you also, if you think about who they've added, like a Belmont played a 3-game series against Kansas last year. If Belmont takes 2 out of 3 from Kansas, that's 2 Big 12 wins. They're playing a 3-game series against Maryland this year. They're going to play Tennessee on a regular basis kind of deal. So I think it balances itself out that way a little bit. To an extent, some teams like SIU will play tough non-conference schedules. They'll challenge. They'll travel to SEC teams and play in SEC parks and all that. But some will stay more regional. Some will play teams in their region. That doesn't help when it comes to strength of schedule and ultimately RPI. And that to me is the biggest reason I don't see the Valley as a multi-bid league. I don't really see them challenging as a multi-bid league. About the only way I could see it is if like a Southern Illinois had a really good regular season and got upset in the conference tournament in a stolen bid. Like if a specific team that does play one of those tough schedules is also dominant in the regular season of the conference, but when the tournament comes around, maybe gets upset, it's about the only potential recipe I see for them even potentially being a multi-bid league. And even then, I don't think it would be a given.
You mentioned Grand Canyon in the WAC. They've been a dominant team, got to a regional final. in Los Angeles. What's your outlook for them? Certainly, Coach Shannon Hayes got a new staff and the assistants. Uh, where are they this year, and where are they as far as the WAC's concerned?
Again, similar to what I said with some other teams, I do still think it's Grand Canyon's conference to lose. I mean, they're the thrice defending champions. I always like using that word, thrice. Um, but they graduated a lot. Like you think about Kristen Fifield or Caitlin Dunkel or plenty of other names that you've identified with Grand Canyon in these runs the last few years. They're all gone now. They're graduated. Savannah Kirk's back. Megan Golden's back in the circle. I like Maggie Place, the transfer from Division Two OBU. I think she'll help them a lot in the circle. Um, it's not the 1 to 9 stud lineup that Grand Canyon had last year. It's not the if they're at a power four doing this, they're all Americans lineup that Grand Canyon had. I do think it's a stable, sturdy lineup, though. I do think it's still a Grand Canyon style lineup. I think there's just more to be proven. Um, so I do still think it's Grand Canyon's conference to lose. I do still think they're a solid team. Like I said earlier, what they lost kind of keeps them out of that best mid-major team for me. Um, and then in the WAC in general, it's an interesting conference to me. You have Grand Canyon who themselves are leaving in a year or two. You've got a Seattle team who's leaving. I think it's next year, in the next couple of years. But Taylor Fitch, by the way, at Seattle, stud. Taylor Fitch, stud at Seattle. Remember that name. Um, and then I look at like a Cal Baptist, who I mean, Mike Smith knows how to win. Cal Baptist has been building a little bit, kind of revitalizing. Lost a lot to the portal. Lost their ace. Lost their stud catcher. Like little interesting what's going on, but do return some good offensive talent. It's Grand Canyon's conference to lose. I think there's a couple of teams that can challenge for that conference crown. And then there's some teams in the middle. I think of a Utah Valley, who I also really like. They play a schedule like I was talking about, where they'll play some tough teams, and they're better for it when conference comes around. Even a Tarleton or a UT Arlington. Try saying that back to back 5 times fast. I dare you. But I think even teams like that kind of in that mid-pack and conference, that have a chance if a certain series goes their way or something, have a chance to be on that upper tier of the conference. So to me, it's Grand Canyon's conference until they prove otherwise, because everybody behind them also is missing some pieces or maybe isn't as fortified as Grand Canyon has been. But I do think there's some contenders behind them.
You mentioned Taylor Fitch.
Yep.
Is that a breakout star potential from a mid-major? Remember how Casey Ricard exploded in the scene last year? Could that be one of the candidates this year to be a breakout in the mid-majors?
Could be. I had a really good year last year. Biggest thing I think from the breakout side is somebody whoever fits that bill needs to have visibility. So to me, where is Seattle going to go in non-con play? Who are they going to play? That's gonna put Fitch on a national stage. I think that's the one key piece that a lot of people don't think of when they think about a potential breakout star. You have to have something that makes everybody pay attention, and maybe that's unfair. Very well could be, but that kind of those two have to go hand in hand. But from a talent perspective, from a skill set perspective, Fitch absolutely belongs in that conversation.
Who's the best mid-major position player
In the WAC or overall?
overall?
Oh, you just put me on the spot. Why don't you? I mean, I'm going to go back to the teams that I said were the top three, and I know that's cheap, and I know. But I look at Rachel Roop at Liberty. Talked about her. She's former conference player of the year. I think she's really, really good. I think she's really, really good. I look at a Jessiana Mora at FAU. Stud third baseman. Stud third baseman. Really good defensively. Kind of a 5-tool offensive kid. Core piece of that lineup. That's a couple off the top of my head. I look at like even if you want to go into the SoCon and look at like I guess you could call her underrated, but I even look over at like UNC Greensboro. Like I look at a Grace Lofton, kind of in that Taylor Fitch category, has had some really good years, but I could see her being a good breakout star. I don't know that you could call her the best, but I just really like Grace Lofton's potential, so I'm going to throw her out there right now because I can. Somebody like that in one of those smaller leagues that's going to get the shot against some big time opponents, whether it's in a midweek or whatever else. I look over there, somebody like that. Even around the Sun Belt, there's some kids in the Sun Belt that I think could be worth something. Don't forget, like Maddie Hayden's still at UL. That's like Taylor McKinney is still at Troy. Like those are some pieces that are going to be core to their teams that by the time we have this conversation at the end of the year could be breakout stars, but could be the best player in the mid majors.
Another name I'm going to throw out there that I think is the best mid-major player is Allison Benning. North Florida, two-way player.
Yep.
If she's healthy, she could put up big numbers and be a player of the year with the A-Sun. Can Allison Benning help North Florida get to their first ever NCAA tournament appearance and dethrone Florida Gulf Coast, the defending champions, who come into the season with head coach David Darius in his final year as FGCU head coach? Some interesting storylines in the A-Sun Conference this year.
Well, and let's not forget too, the ASUN, it's really interesting because the ASUN is moving to that divisional model. I've written about it. I don't love it. Don't get me wrong. I'm just going to come out and say it. I don't love that model. I don't think it's setting the conference up for success. And I think I don't think we will see the ASUN be a multi-bid league again because of it. It's saving money, theoretically, travel costs, but I don't love it from the softball side. That's the biggest storyline for me in the ASUN. After that, then it gets interesting because with those new divisions, you've got North Florida and Florida Gulf Coast probably going head to head for the division title, at least projection wise. You've got a Florida Gulf Coast team. You throw out an Allison Sparkman, you throw out in the circle, you throw out an Avery Biancos at the plate, two big pieces, and on a team that needs to replace some pieces. So when you have to replace a Bonilla or a Peterson or whoever else at Gulf Coast, having a Sparkman or a Biancos that you can, okay, stability is here. Let's fill out behind them. That's helpful. North Florida, you talk about bidding, stud of a two-way player. Leads them both ways. Really good in conference both ways. So that's what's interesting. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't have the ASUN schedule in front of me, but I think those two teams only play once, and I believe it's the last week of the regular season.
That's correct. Yeah.
So like you're really setting up, like kudos to the ASUN schedule makers. You're really setting up a potentially really interesting final week if that's for the division championship. Go to the other division, and you're talking about an Eastern Kentucky that got back to form last year, lost the player of the year, but returns a couple of kids that I think could be player of the year contenders. Maddie Rutan, now a sophomore, two-way player. I like her. Central Arkansas, quietly last year finished third. Like they're non-con coming off of that Beaver Johnson year in 23 where they were just top 20 RPI. They were really bad. Let's just be wins and losses wise really bad at the beginning of last season. By the time conference came around, they ended up finishing third in the ASUN. It was an impressive run to build like they did through the year. So you've got that UCA team over there. Doesn't have a Beaver or a Johnson anymore, but Maddie Young's back at shortstop, a defensive stud. I really like UCA's left side of the infield. I think that's going to be key for them. And then even throw in like an Austin Peay with some really heavy hitters, a Kylie Campbell, even Sammy Sheeler under the Abilene Christian transfer. Like I think the ASUN can be competitive. I don't think it's a multi-bid league. I don't think it really has the potential to be because of the divisional model and what that'll do to RPIs and to record books, or to team sheets, I guess I should say. But I think there's a handful of teams that actually could make a run. I like North Florida and Florida Gulf Coast in that whatever they call the East Division. They call them, I think, Golden Graphite Division, but I don't remember which is which. But from the teams in the East, I like those two teams. Teams in the West, I like Eastern Kentucky, and I like Central Arkansas, maybe to challenge for that one too.
And you like Sparkman there at Florida Gulf Coast there.
I do. I actually really enjoy. She referred to herself once on Twitter as Amanda Scarborough's wind-up twin, and their wind-ups actually are really similar. And I just like that little anecdote. But Sparkman's really good. She was really effective last year, really cool and calm and collected under pressure. Again, I don't have her stats in front of me, so I'm going off memory, but I believe she did not give up a home run through the entire regular season or in the ASUN tournament. Gave up 2 home runs. They were the same kid in the regional. And I think the kid had not hit a home run all year. So it was kind of a matchup there, and the batter won. But Sparkman had a really good freshman year, really good poise that I really like. I think she's going to do big things for Gulf Coast.
May 2nd and 3rd, that's the date when North Florida goes down to Fort Myers to take on Florida Gulf Coast. when you look at top potential mid-major conference series to watch this season in college softball, me and Victor are going to do a segment during the conference portion of the season. We call it the Power 4-in-1, where we're going to pick marquee series from each Power 4 conference and a non-Power 4 conference. Florida Gulf Coast versus North Florida, to me, is at the top of the list, right there with the Wichita State FAU series in Boca Raton during the American Conference, among other notables. That's one to watch because, again, I think it's going to come down to those two teams. You like Florida Gulf Coast. I like North Florida to win the conference. I think whoever wins that conference, if it is one of those two teams, if we're right, I think they're very much could be a 3 seed in an NCAA tournament that could be a pain in the neck. Florida Gulf Coast, last year was a pain in the neck in the Gainesville Regional as a 4 seed.
Yeah. Yeah. That Gainesville Regional last year is still one of my favorites because you had 3 really good mid majors, and then you had Florida. And it was like you knew Florida was going to win, but darn, it was fun along the way.
So that should be fun to watch there in the ASUN Conference. Let's go through other leagues here in the mid majors that we haven't discussed here, and real quick knock these out. Let's talk about the America East. Albany, the defending champs there. What do you see from the America East?
Albany lost a lot. Lost Wendy Hammond, lost Morgan Petty. That's their ace. That's their 2-time player of the year. Lost Maddie Petrello, the starting catcher. Albany lost a lot. The coaches picked him as the preseason favorites. I lean towards Binghamton. I think Lindsey Walter's really good for Binghamton. Binghamton lost some pieces themselves, but I lean towards Binghamton there. And Bryant, came out of nowhere last year. Took the conference by storm, one of the top turnarounds in the country. And they had some young talent, young players that really impressed and that returned this year. So I lean Binghamton, throw a little Bryant. Albany's not going to be far. Could be a fun top half.
I think we got to pass that along to Tony Kornheiser, famous Binghamton alum, on that. For that to happen there, that'll be fun. 8-10, Dayton is the defending champions there.
Yeah, Dayton returns some good talent. I really like Izzy Kemp. I like Emma Shooter. I like Maddie Kipsamilis, and I probably screwed her name up. I apologize. But from on the field, there's nothing to screw up. She's really good. I think that's a really good core for Dayton. They now know what that championship feels like, tastes like. I think that's important. A10 though, George Washington threw in a bunch of Ivy League transfers. I think that'll help them. I look specifically at Anna Reed, who was good, really good in the circle for Harvard. She's now at GW for her final year. I look at a St. Louis and a Fordham who have been good over the years. That top tier of the A10 has been really interesting. I think the stat is 5 of the last 6 championships combining regular season to tournament. Or excuse me, of the last 6 championships, there have been 5 different teams that have won them, combining regular season and tournament. So in the last 3 years, 5 different teams have gotten to call themselves A10 champions. I think it's really interesting in that conference.
Big East, Bridget Orchard and Villanova. I remember I had her on the pod on the eve of the regional, said we got to make some noise, we got to break through, and boy, they made some noise. They eliminated Arkansas in the Fayetteville Regional and got to the regional final before they lost to Arizona. But a big step for Bridget Orchard and Villanova. They're once again the defending champions. They dominated the Big East last year, set a historic year for them. Your thoughts on Bridget Orchard's Wildcats in 2025 and the Big East?
I think the thing that impresses me the most about Villanova is if you go back to the Paige Roush days, when she was playing both ways, hitting and pitching for Villanova, right when Orchard got there. Like that, you could always at least say for the uneducated onlooker, oh, well, that's why. Paige was why. They still got that redhead. No wonder they're still winning. But that was never the case, but it was easily attributable because of how good Paige was. Now you don't have a Paige. Now Villanova's winning because they're a good team. And I think it's a compliment to Orchard and her staff. I think it's a compliment to how she builds a program. But to me, that was what was most interesting about Villanova last year. Because you got to think, 2 years in a row, UConn won the regular season in the Big East. And their championship window is still open. But Villanova, even with lacking that star, that stud in the middle, they go and they win the regular season. They win the tournament. Oh, by the way, to your point, they go into an SEC park and eliminate an SEC team. Hard to do. No matter any situation, hard to do. So I really do like Villanova. I that stood out to me about Villanova. I look at a UConn team. They can't get over that hump. They can't seem to make the NCAA tournament. Couple of regular season titles, 22, 23. Can't seem to get back to the NCAA tournament. They haven't been since I won. Good talent. Lexi Hastings, reigning player of the year. She's back. Peyton Kenny's back in the circle. I think those are two important pieces. But I don't know what UConn needs to do to take that next step and make the tournament. That's really all they're missing. The rebuild is complete if they just make the NCAA tournament. They just can't seem to get there. But their championship window is still open. So I think they're a contender. Throw in a Creighton. Natalie Pacino, the reigning pitcher of the year, she's not back. That's a big hole to fill. But I would throw Creighton into the list of contenders as well.
Yeah, I like Creighton. I know what they lost, but Krista Wood, going back to her days at South Dakota State, they build, knock on the door and break through. They made a run at the Big East Championship last year before losing to Villanova. I think they're going to be in the mix. I agree with you about Connecticut. They had won the regular season title a couple of years back in the Big East, just you mentioned, haven't broken through in the tournament, but I like Villanova. I think Bridget Orchard, if we did a top 5, top 10 mid-major head coaches in the sport, she's on that list easily. What she's done at her alma mater, and of course what she did at Fordham. I don't think there's any question there, and I think she's earned the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, absolutely, not a question in my mind.
And I believe they're hosting the Big East tournament this year too. So, good times for them. Unlike their basketball program, we move on to the Big Sky, where Northern Colorado is the defending champions. Justin, what are you expecting from the Big Sky?
What's funny is Northern Colorado has been so freaking consistent since DeAnn Pendleton Helm got there. Really consistent. Couple of conference championships in there, couple of NCAA tournament appearances, but they really impressed me in the NCAA tournament last year. Stillwater Regional, Michigan, Kentucky. They lost both games, but those were two of the hardest fought games in the tournament in the regional round. They looked good. They held their own against big time opponents, against big time pitchers, and against big time offenses. Really impressed me on that stage. I have them still as the favorites. They graduated some key pieces, but that consistency has really impressed me. I'm a Northern Colorado believer. I think they've got a good thing going. I think that championship experience and that postseason experience and that postseason poise is going to be really super handy for them. Big Sky is a small conference. You've got a lot of teams in there that have won championships in the past, but I mean, Weber State, think about how good they were a couple of years ago, kind of bottomed out since then, maybe need to build back up a little bit. A Sacramento State team that's a little up and down, but kind of always in contention. So there's some contenders, but to me, Northern Colorado's top of the list.
Big South, USC Upstate is the defending champions there. Justin, I know you have literally spoken to every head coach in the Big South. Folks, we're not making this up here at D1 Softball. Between Justin and I, we have spoken to at least about 100, 150 head coaches, would you say? Is that a fair number to say between the two of us?
I can't stop the count. I can't count.
Stop the count?
I have to let the Excel sheet count for me, but it's been a lot.
That's a lot. Well, we know this. You've spoken to everybody in the Big South there. Yep. What's your thoughts? What's your read after talking to every coach in the Big South?
I like the conference. I think it's small, but I think there's some competition to be had. Upstate, to me, returns what they need to be able to win it again. I like their pitching. Chris Hawkins has sold me. He's got a freshman pitcher coming out of the state of Florida that supposed to really be able to complement Sierra Manis. Manis was good last year. She was solid and sturdy. Longwood, always towards the top. Again, another one of those teams that can't quite finish. I think that's something to look for over there. I think Longwood's consistent. So we go back to that era of consistency. But I think Longwood's one of those teams. They're going to be there and they're going to get there at some point. Is this the year? Throw in a Gardner-Webb, throw in a Radford that I do think is building up again, fortifying a little bit. Even throw in a Winthrop that did well with the first-year head coach last year. Small conference. Upstate and Longwood, to me, are the two teams to beat. But if you sat here and told me after the year that a Winthrop or a Radford or Gardner-Webb, maybe even a Presbyterian or Charleston Southern made a run, okay, I get it. I think small conference, but it's a really tight-knit conference. But Upstate and Longwood are my picks to one of them take it home.
Best player in the conference?
I'm going to play it safe and go Denver Lauer at Upstate. I think she's pretty good. I think she's really good. Got some votes for Player of the Year last year. I think she's pretty good.
I like Longwood like you do. Megan Brown, Dr. Megan Brown, who obviously former standout player in the pros and of course in the Division II softball. It's done a pretty good job at Longwood there. Like you mentioned, just got to get over the hump there, but they've been in the mix. I like Gardner Webb as a sleeper there too. Bailey Wigness, a protege of the Sydney Ball Malone coaching tree, was an assistant at Boise State. It's kind of been building Gardner Webb from the bottom up. They had a good non-conference last year. They knocked off Indiana. Didn't perform to that level in the conference. When I spoke to her on the podcast, she even acknowledged that. I think they're going to be in that mix. It's time there. She got an extension there, so I'm intrigued that league with Gardner Webb. But I mean, it's tough to go against Upstate. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, as they say there. But I'm with you on Longwood challenging, and I like Gardner Webb. I think those are the three. I think it's always the Big South always seems to be messy when it comes to standing. It always seems like by the time we get to that ESPN Big South game, the standings are a mess, and then it kind of sorts itself out by the end. But that will be the storyline there in the Big South, to say the least. But fine folks over there. Now, let's go out west, the Big West. And it's kind of surprising we actually took this long to talk about it, partly because I went alphabetical order here over the last few minutes. But a lot of interesting storylines in the Big West. Cal State Fullerton begins the post-Kelly Ford era there. This is a league as recent as 2 years ago was a multi-bid league. Give me your thoughts on the Big West and the impact on Fullerton now going post-Kelly Ford. They bring back an alum to be the head coach.
I think it's interesting at Fullerton with the coaching change, what Gene Oaks Garcia is going to be able to do. To me, the biggest storyline in the Big West is the transfer portal. Some of the best players in the Big West all gone to the portal.
Arguably, maybe the conference hurt the most. It's probably them and the conference formerly known as the Colonial, probably the two hardest hit leagues. Justin loves that. I always take a little swipe at this. I'll explain that when we get to that conference. But those two leagues, right, Justin, in the mid-major, probably hit the hardest from the portal getting hit. You're talking players like Jessica Clemens going from Cal Poly to UCLA, Megan Delgadillo, who Kenny Gajewski just glows about, is at Oklahoma State coming over from Fullerton. That's just two to name a bunch others in that league, and it's going to be interesting. The league, which was an exciting league last year from a depth standpoint, but took a hit from a talent level standpoint.
Well, so the thing is, last year, if you look at the top three teams in the conference, you had Cal State Fullerton, Long Beach State, Cal Poly. Cal State Fullerton lost Haley Rainey, Stacey Chambers, their top two pitchers, their money arms. One Rainey goes to Auburn, Chambers goes to Oregon. Those were late departures. That was after the coaching change. So they didn't pick anybody up. You lose Delgadillo from the lineup, Golden Shoe winner, stolen base queen. Really good player. Really, really solid player. Going to make a big difference for Oklahoma State this year. All of a sudden, Cal State Fullerton goes from juggernauts to, okay, they're still good, but how good are they? Then go down to Cal Poly. You lose the Jess Clements, player of the year. You lose the Sophia Remuno. Solid pitcher for them. All of a sudden, Cal Poly goes from a third place team to okay, what are they now team? I think that's something that's interesting for me in a conference where you already had teams like UC Davis that graduated a lot of talent. You've got a Long Beach State team that has some injuries that they've had to deal with and some different things like that. But what are they made of? Took a little bit of a step back last year after making the tournament 23. Big West for me is full of question marks. I couldn't sit here and tell you who I think is the best. I couldn't sit here and tell you who I think is the best player, to be honest with you. I think it's wide open conference. Normally, I don't know that I've ever said that about Fullerton because they're always at the top. And if nothing else, I would say, okay, well, Fullerton's at the top until they're not. This year, I think it's wide open. I genuinely think it's wide open. I've said it already. The experience matters. The postseason experience matters. It matters to Fullerton. Matters to Long Beach, who, by the way, have Shannon Haddad back. Circle that name. She was hurt last year. But I think Big West is wide open for the taking.
I agree. And really, it was a fun league to watch last year. West Coast, every weekend, everybody beat each other up. It is an odd year. Odd years have been very kind to Kim Souter and Long Beach State in this decade. They have made the tournament each odd year. Keep that in mind. They host Fullerton and have swept them, the last two odd years to win the league down at the end of the regular season. With this, is this the first year they're doing the Big West tournament, or is that next year?
It's this year. Six teams
Woo!
make it.
So
Double elimination.
that could be a wild tournament. Joe
Uh-huh.
Evans, UC Santa Barbara could open the door
Yep.
for them. You
Yep.
got Charlotte Morgan and CSUN. I mean, I'm telling you, you mentioned it right. This could be as wide open of a league, and because in a way, it'll be exciting just like it was last year. Because literally every weekend's up for grabs. Because you're right, everybody is vulnerable. Everybody's got to identify themselves. I kind of like Long Beach. I like trends like that, Justin. Odd year, Long Beach State. I might go with them there.
I like Long Beach's pitching a little bit. I like the pitching. I think Shannon had been a stud since she got to college. He was hurt last year. She's a sixth-year senior, which we don't have a lot of left. Even a Lindsey Cowens transferring over from Long Island. I like Long Beach's pitching. I think their pitching could help them.
All right, let's first mention the other league that got hit hard by the transfer portal, the conference that I like to refer to as formerly the Colonial Athletic Conference, the CAA, formerly the Colonial. I will always call it that ever since the year they banned James Madison from postseason. I have just took it out on them ever since, and that's why I will refer to them as formerly the Colonial. What is actually their actual name?
The Coastal Athletic Association.
There you go. What's your thoughts on that league and their departures there? Because they had also some personnel departures through the portal.
They did. I will say this. I don't think there is a conference in the country where I have more questions around the pitching league wide. Trying to pick a preseason conference pitcher of the year in the CAA was extremely difficult. Not because there's nobody there who's talented, just because everybody that after last year I would have gone to is gone now. I look at a Campbell, regular season champs last year. Bella Smith transfers to Oklahoma. I look at UNC Wilmington, tournament champs last year, played in the NCAA tournament, second tournament in 3 years. Emily Winstead transfers, Alabama. Kara Hammock transfers, Florida. So all of a sudden, right there, you've got three aces from two different teams all going to the SEC. I go to Delaware, Emily Winburn graduated. I go to Stony Brook, Mia Haynes graduated. List keeps going. List keeps going. So to me, I'm really curious what the pitching is going to look like in the CAA. I think the pitching is going to be what decides the CAA this year. Who's got a pitcher that's going to step out? Who's got a couple of pitchers that are going to step up? I think I went Billy Kerwood from Delaware, Monmouth transfer, knows the conference, has played in the conference, stayed in the conference, going to finish at Delaware. Picked her as conference preseason pitcher of the year, but I look at a Hannah Learer at Campbell. She could step out. I look in different places. UNCW pulled in a couple of transfers who didn't really play a lot at their last schools, but could be worth something. You throw them in there, you give them innings, they could be worth something. It's a lot of options. To me, the pitching is going to be what decides the CAA.
Delaware, can it get over the hump? Jen Steele and company have been good in the regular season, but not so good in the conference tournament, and that's where you make the tournament. Ashley Wade, the UNCW head coach, maybe a rising star as a head coach there. Lost a lot though. If anybody though can figure it out in a rebuild, it could be her at UNCW over there. Of course, Delaware, by the way, in their final year in the conference, formerly in the Colonial, before they move on to Conference USA. Another school that is in their final year period is Cleveland State. They will be defending their Horizon League Conference Championship after winning last year, making the NCAA. Unfortunately, some recent news announced by the university that they're cutting back on some sports, including softball. Justin, your reaction to Cleveland State dropping softball? Is this certainly a concern moving forward with the direction that college athletics is going, with certainly with revenue sharing coming, it appears, in college athletics with the settlement. You got the NIL, you got sports, schools. What's your reaction to the Cleveland State news? Because that will be the biggest storyline in the horizon, is Cleveland State playing in their final year here. A team that could potentially get back to the tournament and then be done, literally.
I mean, unfortunately, it won't be the last time. It's not. Unfortunately, it's not the first. Unfortunately, it won't be the last. We see a program go away. It is sad. Anytime you see a program that gets shut down, especially for financial reasons, it's sad. The fact that Cleveland State just won the tournament, the Horizon League tournament, just played the NCAA tournament, played in the Norman Regional even. That adds an element to it, because it's almost like going out at the top. I mean, going out at the top, I guess technically it's a national championship, but coming out of the Horizon League, making the NCAA tournament, and winning the Horizon League crown, that's pretty much as close to the top. To me, the timing sucks a little extra because of that. But at the same time, it probably is going to motivate that Cleveland State team. They do return a lot of pieces. They return Missy Holzapfel, their two-way star, all conference in two different places last year. You don't see that very often. MVP of the Horizon League tournament last year. Really good. That's going to be the linchpin for them. But I could see this also motivating that Cleveland State team. It's a competitive Horizon League. Youngstown State, Northern Kentucky, Oakland, a lot of pieces or a lot of teams. But I could see this motivating Cleveland State in that race. Yeah, you know what? If we're going to go out on top, let's actually go out on top.
It's going to be bizarre. I mean, because you could have a scenario where the program ends and a bunch of those players are going to try to enter the portal right afterwards.
Yeah.
And coaches are going to be looking for jobs. Is that going to be a distraction during the year? Right. But like you said, or it could inspire them to go out on top, and it'll be interesting. We're going to be monitoring that story throughout the year here on In the Circle and D1 Softball. And unfortunately, I kind of agree with you. I think there's going to be, the next few years, I think you're going to see some other softball programs dropped, as I think many athletic departments are going to have to make tough decisions with all the finances that's coming here with the revenue sharing and everything like that. It seems like softball could become a scapegoat on that versus some other sports that usually get a pass. So we'll see. That's going to be an interesting storyline there in the horizon that we will be following there throughout. Moving on to the Ivy League. Princeton is the defending champs. Princeton last year eliminated Ole Miss in the Lafayette Regional and gave Louisiana all they can handle as a 4 seed. Mm-hmm. Speaking of young, what's your thoughts on the Ivy League, and can Princeton duplicate that, or somebody else can duplicate that?
Princeton looked really good. I mean, how often does an Ivy League team eliminate an SEC team in the postseason? Like the mid-major lover in me just loves that. Just forget who the teams are. An Ivy League team eliminating an SEC team from the postseason. That was great from the mid-major side. Like the mid-majors need that boost. Ivy League's got good softball. I look at two players as kind of the budding faces of the conference of softball offering. I look at Sophie Sun, I look at Sonia Zhang, Harvard and Princeton respectively. They're both really good. Clearly smart too, being in the Ivy League, but they're very good softball players. They're going to be the backbones of their respective teams for the next 3 years. They are. I think Harvard probably and Princeton is right there with Princeton for me, 1-2. I don't want to leave out Yale, who climbed up into that tie for first place last year, 3-way tie for first place in the Ivy. But to me, it's Princeton and Harvard, top 2 teams. And throw in a Jensen Hall mention, also really good as a freshman. Zhang and Sun and Hall, heck of a freshman trio last year. 3 really good freshmen in the Ivy.
I was impressed with Princeton. I saw him live against UCF last season and gave UCF all they could handle. Like it was wild, and I was impressed with head coach Lisa Van Ackeren as another coach on the rise there. I think she enjoys it there at Princeton, but I would not be surprised if some other schools come calling down the road, because she's done a heck of a job there, and she's got good talent, as you mentioned there. I like Princeton to repeat, and that's a team you're not going to want to see in your bracket, just like Ole Miss found out a year ago. Absolutely. in the Lafayette Regional there. The MAAC with 2 A's. You've got Siena's the defending champs, excuse me, the MAAC there with teams like Marist, Joe Asani, who's done a good job. You got Siena in there. What's your quick thought on the MAAC?
I like Marist. Haley R., Maya McDonald, 2 really good studs for Marist. Just missed on the NCAA tournament run, but they were really good in the regular season. I think it's a good club. Asania knows how to coach a winner. They've had some good talent come through Marist and good talent that stayed even in the portal era. I like Marist.
The MAAC with 1A, of course, Miami, of course, a bit of a change there. Mandy Colgate in her first year as head coach after Karen Kumar left to become the Ohio State head coach. Carly Spade graduated, but they still have Jenna Golubinski, who will certainly be their MAAC Player of the Year favorites there. But yet this feels like, and you mentioned this on your forecast, which again, people who subscribe to D1 Sup get every forecast of every conference preview in the country, not just the Power 4, it's every conference. You believe this is the most wide open MAAC in years.
I do. I really do. I think the thing about it for me with the MAAC, Miami has been such a juggernaut because of their bats the last couple of years. but a lot of those bats graduated, and a couple of extras transferred out. And to me, that's the piece that makes this conference more competitive. You've got an Ohio that's got a really good 1-2 punch with Skip Miller and Mikey Levering. I really like Ohio's pitching. You've got a Western Michigan and a Toledo and other programs that have built. I think this is going to be a competitive conference. This is going to go back, even a Ball State, by the way, Michaela Timmons, remember that name. Um, I think this is going to go back to the late 2010s MAAC, where you've got 4 or 5 teams all fighting each other. You don't have a generational hitter like Carly Spade in there and a lineup that benefits from her being in it. You still have a hitter like Golombiewski, who you mentioned, that's really good. She'll be in the Miami Hall of Fame the year after Spade is, whenever that happens. But you don't have just the juggernaut offense that Miami has had the last few years. Just those hitters, they're gone. They're graduated. So I do think this is the most competitive the MAAC has been in quite a while.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what Golumbieski's production is without Carly Spade there. Certainly one of the best mid-major players there. And see, do you have a pick there wide open? Who do you like? That's the hardest conference I've had to figure out. That one there.
I'm tempted to pick Ohio. I'll stick with Miami just because I think what could be an X factor for Miami is the fact that they went back to having a pitching coach as head coach, with hiring Mandy Gardner-Colgate. Pitching has been the place that, as that offense has done so well the last few years, the pitching staff is not. The pitching staff has been pretty questionable a lot of the time, and they just outslugged other teams. The fact that they hired a pitching coach as head coach again, I think that unit's going to improve, and I think that could be what decides it for Miami at the end. So I'm going to stick with Miami, but I do think Ohio is the closest they've been to them.
Ohio Valley Conference, Eastern Illinois, been successful the last couple of years. Of course, lost Tara Archibald, their head coach. She's now the pitching coach at Texas Tech. She's coaching. I think she actually picked up a good pitcher over there at Lubbock. Naija, I believe her name is. She's good. That's a good game.
Oh, I haven't heard of her.
Might be.
You said I'm going to write that down and Google her later.
Interesting. I wonder how she'll handle. How she'll develop her there. As a result, Eastern Illinois has a new head coach. You got SEMO there in the mix. What's your thoughts on the impact of Tara Archibald leaving and the overall thoughts on the OVC?
I think the OVC is a fun league. I do think Archibald leaving makes EIU a little more vulnerable. Like that, you had a little bit of a mini dynasty going. I think that is on a little shakier ground now. Still got some talent there. Mackenzie Aslanzi in the circle, Kendall Grover at the plate. So I think EIU will be in the conference hunt. I like SEMO. SEMO is one of those teams, like we've talked about a few of them already, where they just know how to win. They're always the top of the league. For me, Southern Indiana is the sleeper team there. Josie Newman, I really like Josie Newman. Another two-way player, just a really solid arm, really solid hitter. I think she's going to be key for Southern Indiana. They moved up from Division II a couple of years ago. They've been building in the OVC since they got there. I think they're a contender, and I think they've got a shot at a conference championship. So for me, it's those 3 teams. It's EIU, it's SEMO, it's Southern Indiana, but I'm telling you, just keep an eye on Southern Indiana.
SoCon, it's been a league that's been, it appears it's been dominated by Greensboro and Chattanooga. It seems like they take turns, it seems like every other year or so, winning the conference championship. Chattanooga was the defending champion last year. Frank Reed, remember talking to him in the Tallahassee Regional, said that was the best team he's ever had at Chattanooga. That's the good news. The bad news is most of them are gone now. They graduated for the most part. Does that mean this is Greensboro's conference this year, or do you like somebody else in the league? What's your thoughts on the SoCon?
Chattanooga returns the pieces that I think they need to do it again. Like they return good pieces. I like Greensboro's returners too, to be honest. I think that's what's interesting about this year is you've got those two teams scheduled, or not scheduled, but set to go really kind of head to head for that title again. I look at the Sanfords of the world and Olivia Shaw there. I look at Wofford with Margaret Axelson, second year of their program. Even a Mercer, Tori Hedgecock, just a breakout career year last year. I picked her. If you haven't read the SoCon preview, I picked her to be preseason player of the year. I think she's that good. Younger sister of Ryland Hedgecock, formerly of Arkansas. I wrote that article back in the spring if you want to check that out. But no, I think there's some really good talent on a lot of the teams in the SoCon. I still think it's Chattanooga and Greensboro at the top, but I think there's other teams that could join them there.
Wow, features on mid-major players. I mean, involving them. I mean, that's What concept, Justin? We could get that on D1 Softball, among other great features over there as well. Let's discuss the Southland. And
Yep.
the big story there last year was McNeese not winning the conference tournament after winning the regular season. It was Southeast Louisiana. Credit to you. A year ago on this very show that we are doing right now, this annual show we're doing, you said McNeese could be had, and you liked Southeast Louisiana as your sleeper there, and not to be shocked if they were the team representing the Southlands. You were a prophet a year ago, so so tip of my cap to you literally, because I'm wearing a cap. Your thoughts on the 2025 edition? How does McNeese bounce back from that, and what's your overall thoughts on the Southland?
Here's what's funny. We've talked about the conferences that were hit the hardest by the transfer portal. The Southland is the conference that was hit the hardest by the COVID D1, D2 JUCO rule. Southeastern Louisiana had a huge core of talent that had a year of eligibility left, but it was from the JUCO COVID year, and they could not take that at Division One. Their Division One eligibility was run out, so they moved it. They had to go to D2 or lower, and that just gutted Southeastern Louisiana's roster. A Sarah Blanchard, a Bailey Krolchik, like it gutted it. Makes it interesting this year, though, because McNeese also lost pieces. Shaylin Sanders gone. Ashley Vallejo gone. Corinne Poncho gone. All of a sudden, Southeastern Louisiana, over there, one and done. Oh, McNeese, they didn't make the tournament, or they done. And now both of them have question marks. So does that even out the conference? I think maybe it evens out the conference. Throw in an Incarnate Word. Remember that run they made in the conference tournament, going right down to the end? You throw in Player of the Year, Victoria Altamirano. She's good. She's really good. I think Southland's in a really interesting place. Also of note, postseason Southland going a really interesting place. A 2-week tournament. The last week of the regular season for other conferences will be the first week of the Southland tournament. They're going to play 2 sets of 4-team pods. Top 2 seeds in the conference will host. Double elim, winner of the pod, and the winner of the other pod come out, play a 3-game series conference tournament week. Winner of that series goes to the NCAA tournament. Really curious how that's going to go. Is it going to be Southeastern Louisiana versus McNeese? Are we going to see an upset that prohibits somebody from being able to fight their way out of a true loser's bracket? Really curious how that's going to go.
2-week tournament. Wow. That is, what do they think this is? The NBA first round? Like taking forever there, but we'll see how that plays out for the Southland there to do that. West Coast Conference. St. Mary's won the league last year. Oregon State is in the league this year. I know we both have talked to Laura Berg about it. Of course, Oregon State, with everything that happened with the Pac-12, they're in the West Coast Conference edition. Loyola Marymount had some injuries last year they dealt with. It's a small league. Kind of the future of the league's kind of interesting because they're trying to add some teams, but now they might have to fight them to keep up those agreements. We'll see. That could be interesting, but we'll just focus on the 2025 West Coast Conference. Your thoughts on the West Coast Conference and Oregon State's addition to it?
I don't know what to make of Oregon State, to be dead honest with you. That's a team full of transfers, full of unfamiliar
Lost
faces.
a lot of players to the portal that said wanted to just play somewhere else, play in a Power 4 league if most of them ended up there. So she had to literally rebuild the roster from the fly.
Literally rebuild it. I will say I like Logan Hulan. She did well, a little bit of a breakout star last year, the former Texas and Houston pitcher. I think that she's going to be key for Oregon State this year. Looking at the Loyola Marymount, I think the biggest thing for me is how are they going to replace Jenna Perez? I mean, that's a 3-time conference pitcher of the year. How many pitchers anywhere can say they were 3-time conference pitcher of the year? It just doesn't happen very often. So she's going to be really tough for them to replace. I think that could be the linchpin. Who steps up and to fill those shoes could be the linchpin for LMU. And then, honestly, though, St. Mary's has a shot at repeating. Like, that's not a one-year wonder team. They return their 3 best pitchers. Like, they return their 3-headed monster in the circle. I think that's huge. That's huge for St. Mary's. They played in the tournament. They got over that hump of getting into the NCAA tournament. Again, West Coast Conference, only league without a conference tournament still. Now that the Big West has one. Now the Mountain West and the Big West have them. West Coast Conference is all that's left. So the regular season is what matters. And a 3-headed pitching monster in the regular season makes a difference. Makes a big difference. I honestly, not knowing what to make of Oregon State, Loyola Marymount needing to replace Perez, On paper, preseason, I might go St. Mary's to repeat.
Yeah, that's going to be fascinating. Like, what do you think the future of that league is? Because it's kind of like they're supposed to add some pieces, but now they might lose them to the Mountain West. What do we, can they, it's because I know there's a minimum, you have to have a minimum amount of teams to be eligible to get an automatic bid in the NCAA tournament.
So they're at the minimum, even with the changes. So what'll happen is Oregon State's there's an affiliate member now. When either before or when Oregon State goes back to the new Pac-12, Seattle will be in the West Coast Conference. So basically, right now, with Oregon State, West Coast Conference, 6 softball members. That's the minimum to get an automatic bid, to qualify for an automatic bid for your conference. Seattle will take Oregon State's spot. So the West Coast Conference will stay at 6. So they'll stay at that minimum. Their automatic bid is not in question because of that. Grand Canyon was supposed to join them, who will now not do that and will now join the Mountain West straight from the WAC. So you're going to have the minimum. You're going to keep your automatic bid if you're the West Coast Conference. What it means from a softball perspective is a good question. Seattle's a solid program, but I think when you're that small of a conference, especially without a conference tournament where the regular season matters, but you're only playing so many regular season conference games, it gets interesting. But the automatic bid's not in question because of the addition of Seattle to ultimately add to / replace Oregon State. And then they stay at a 6-team league, assuming no more departures. And then it gets interesting after that.
3 more conferences to go. You got the SWAC, the MEAC, and the Northeast Conference. Justin, your thoughts on those 3 leagues?
So let's start in the SWAC. It's interesting to me because I look at a Prairie View and they've been so solid and so good. And then I look over at the East Division of the SWAC, and they've had somebody at the top who then falls to 4th place, who then rises to 2nd place. And you've got so many teams that can fight for the top in the SWAC, especially in the SWAC East, and I love that about it. One to watch for me this year is Alabama State in the SWAC. Prairie View, obviously, I think will still be really good, but Alabama State is the one to watch for me in the SWAC. In the MEAC, it's Howard. I think it's Howard. They made the NCAA tournament a couple of years ago, returned some good talent. You got Torrey Tyson as head coach. I think Howard's the one to watch in the MEAC.
Good
and
offense there, good lineup there.
They do have a good lineup. They got good returning talent. And then in the Northeast, the biggest question for me is how does St. Francis fill the shoes of a very large departed senior class? That to me is the biggest piece. I think the Northeast Conference is a little more wide open. I don't think St. Francis is going to be bad, but I do think they're going to take a little bit of a step back. Can somebody take advantage of that?
That is all 27 mid-major conferences. Of course, we did Power 4 on the live show. So that's all 31 conferences, ladies and gentlemen, we have discussed here on this program. Couple quick thoughts here before we wrap this up. Who wins this new award? I'm going to call it this year, the Jordan Clark Award. The award of a rising star coach in the mid-major that we're going to be talking about in May or June, and it's going to be on your list when you do coaching candidate lists when jobs open across the country, whether it's top mid-major jobs or Power 4 jobs. Jordan Clark last year broke through, led FAU to the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2016, won the American. She's become a hot name. Think back a few years ago with Cindy Ball Malone. UCF 2022 would have probably won this award when she led UCF to a super regional for the first time in program history. Think of Rodney DeLong when they got to a regional final. Those are just a few examples. Who would be your pick this year as a coach that becomes a rising name in this industry this year in the mid-major?
So I'll give you a couple because I can't do just one. You know that when you ask the question. But I'm gonna give them to you with reasons attached as well. I want to look at a couple of programs that I think if they rise like I think they could, I think their coaches could be hot commodities. I'm going to look at Jessica Bracamani at Toledo. Toledo's been kind of pretty consistent, getting better. I think that's one to watch. I'm going to stay in the MAAC, look at Helen Pena at Ball State, only 2nd year as a head coach, but her 1 year as an assistant at Middle Tennessee, then last year as a head coach at Ball State. I really like what I've seen from her. I'm going to look over at Louisiana Monroe, and I'm going to look at Molly Fickner. Fickner's done a really good job, but ULM through her has done a really good job of building off the field. They're finally starting to get some talent on the field. I think that's going to make a difference. I think that's going to be a difference maker over there in Monroe. And, you know, I'm going to say this, and it's going to be interesting what happens with it because I think it's only going to work for certain jobs. But I'm going to look at like a Jen Sewell at Southern Illinois. SIU's been good, but what if a Big Ten team calls? Geography's right. SIU's been good. She's been part of a lot of success at SIU. Is that somebody in situations like that? So I'll put Sewell on that list too. The thing for me with coaches in this spot, I think you need a pattern of sustained success, but I think you also need to show the ability to work with what you got. And that's the thing about that group for me. And you mentioned it like Clark at FAU. You may not have all the resources, you may not have all the talent, but if you find a way to do what you can with what you've got, I think that's something, especially in the day and age in which we're living. And when we get to revenue sharing, a coach who can live within their means and have success. Obviously, we want more and more for our sport, for our game. Obviously, we want that. And obviously, that only helps us. But I think the value of a coach who, instead of saying, I need $100, that can say, I have $50. What can I do with $50? Makes a difference. And I think that's going to be something that these athletic directors and others are going to really look for in these next few years outside of football, maybe even outside of football and men's basketball. I think that's something that is going to be key. The talents to be able to do what you do successfully in your profession, but to do it with what you've got. I think that's going to be key. And so there's a few names that I think could fit that bill and can do that.
That was a deep list.
I couldn't give you just one, you know that.
That's fair. I'm going to throw in a couple you didn't mention just about Shane Winkler. Yep. Has led programs, Charleston Southern and George Washington to the NCAA tournament. If he puts East Carolina near the top of that list, I got to believe he'll be mentioned for some power jobs. Particularly, let's say something opens up in the ACC in that region, something like that. That could be somebody named to watch over there. I would say, I know she just started as a head coach, but Victoria Haywood could have some Jordan Clark vibes there if she wins quickly at Nevada. I think for sure she becomes a candidate for many jobs there, becomes a big name. I mean, she's already a name, but just from people being interested in her, I would say that would throw that in there. You had her in the top 10 top hires, head coaching the offseason in the article that you can check out right now on D1 Softball as well.
And I'll throw one more out at you. Look at Ashley Wade over at UNCW. If Wilmington succeeds this year after losing those two pitchers, Wade already took him to the tournament last year. If they have success after losing those two pitchers, she's one to keep an eye on that I could see. Kind of sneaks under the radar, but if Wilmington has success this year in the CAA, I'd keep an eye on Wade too.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a very good one as well to discuss there. Last question here. We do this every year. Over under the amount of at-large bids that a mid-majors get in the NCAA tournament. Last year, they had 3 at-large spots, 2 from the Sun Belt, 1 from the American, down from 2 years ago where they had 5. What I'm going to say over under this year, 2.5.
That's tough. So anybody listening to this, especially this deep into it, already knows I'm a mid-major guy. Been my bread and butter for 14 seasons now. Not that I neglect the Power Four, but you got to give the love to the mid-majors. I've always made sure to do that. I love me some mid-majors. Great stories, great talent, great people. The thing that's tough this year for me is with conference realignment and with what's lacking at a lot of mid-major schools that are normally tournament juggernauts. I'm not sure how mid-majors are going to be seen. Like we've talked about the Big West, we've talked about the Sun Belt, and usually strong conferences, potential multi-bid leagues, and their weaknesses this year, all at once. Even the American is weaker than it was last year with Charlotte's fall. I hope I'm wrong. I actually do hope I'm wrong, and that teams that play well from the mid-major ranks are rewarded. But as it stands right now, before anybody touches the field, I'm going to go under.
That has been the trend. I know in volleyball in the fall, they had the lowest at-large number in years in the committee, and that was a big topic over there in their sport over there with these large super conferences now. You know, it's harder and harder for mid majors to compete with these power conferences. Can they get enough? Last year, like I said, only 3 younger teams this year. We'll see. I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to say over, but they're going to need some help. You know, for example, teams like Washington and Stanford, there's going to be a drop off there with the departures that those 2 teams have had. How much of a departure? Do they miss the tournament? Maybe they pick up some teams in the Big 12 that are down. Maybe the Big 12 is only a 4-bid league. They're going to need some help in that regard. Could be maybe somebody, we're kind of due for a bid stealer. I feel like where maybe if somebody upsets Liberty, but Liberty's resume is good enough, and that almost happened last year. Maybe that's a second bid. I think the American being in Tampa, let's say they're on track for a 2-bid league, but a team like South Florida steals that bid, for example, that could be a third. So I'm going to be optimistic and over, not by much, because I don't think the mid majors will be able to get 5 or 6 like they did a couple of years ago. It's just too tough. And I think right now we're kind of seeing, I think we're going to start seeing a bit of a separation in the mid majors where I think the American and the Sun Belt will start separating themselves from the other mid-major leagues, like for reasons like we discussed on this show, like the Mountain West is going to break up, basically. It's the best way I could describe it. Yeah. The A-Sun keeps adding G2 programs. You know, I thought, you know, so we'll see. I think I'm going to be optimistic, but I understand the trend has been down, unfortunately, in the other sports, and, you know, it might last here in softball, so we'll see. If that materializes. But that's it, folks. That's our annual show. Shout out to Wimblero. He keeps asking about this show. It's one of his favorites. Here you are, buddy. It's for you. I know you better give me some feedback after giving us the shout out. Justin, tell the audience where they can find us, the content for mid-majors and across the entire country in college softball right now and D1 softball.
Well, so I know we're at the cusp of the season here, the start of the season. If you want to look at what's in store, any of the conferences, all 31 conferences, we've got previews on D1, all kinds of content in January. I couldn't even name you all the content we published in January. Busy month. Coming up, once we start the season, we're going to have all the normal stuff, our top 25, our players of the week. We've got some really good feature stories. I've actually got a couple that are already written that we're going to publish that I'm really excited about. All kinds of stuff. Like the one thing, content doesn't stop. So we've got all kinds of stuff coming. We've got weekly previews each week of the season. We've got our live scoreboard, personal favorite, makes my life a lot easier when I'm on the road covering games. That's obviously our one of our things on the site. All kinds of stuff. We had plenty during the preseason. We're going to have plenty during the regular season.
And I can't give away any details here, but I know that Justin, you got some plans, some interesting mid-major content throughout the season that you will unveil in soon. So you need to stay tuned. Trust me, it's a pretty cool stuff with D1 content. As far as mid-major, we cover every conference. We'll have features. We'll have other content. And as I mentioned, the American is in Tampa. And if you've listened to this show, me and Vic talk a lot about that. We might have some coverage out there when we get to the championships. But that's down the road. We got to get ready for the season. Justin, always a pleasure doing this show. A lot of the audience enjoys this show. This is one of the more talked about segments and shows that we do every year because there's more of us than there are of them when it comes to fans of softball and mid-major softball. And nobody does it. Nobody else. This is the only place you get it right here, folks. Justin, always a pleasure, sir. We'll be talking soon.
Always fun.